Nina Park, Katie Jane Hughes, Pat McGrath, and Judy Lim. These are all incredibly talented makeup artists that have been kind of pioneering makeup trends and perfecting them, so much so that many people are trying to recreate their looks all the time. And while each of these artists have their own unique set of skills and styles, what is one thing that they have in common? The blurred lip look. So the blurred lip look is a trend that originated in Korea that focuses the lip color on the center of the lips, and then it kind of like blurs it into the corners to a diffused look. And while the trend originated in Korea, we've long seen it in other places such as Europe, specifically in France, where it's more so called this effortless bitten look. But most recently, we've seen a huge rise in the trend because of makeup artists like Nina Park. And Nina Park has caught the attention of the beauty world with the feathery lip looks that she creates, and Allure calls it a slightly bitten, lightly flushed look that's matte but not dry. And while the look is meant to seem effortless, makeup artists have an arsenal of products at their disposal to create these long-lasting, perfectly customized to each person lip look, and where the trends go, the brands will follow. So today, I thought that we would do a showdown of all of the most popular blurring lip liner products to see which one stands out as the do-it-all product for us non-makeup artists out there. For the past few weeks, I have been collecting and testing out products categorized as a blurred lip pencil or more loosely blurring lip contours. And before we get started, you might be asking the same question that I did when I started looking into this, which is how is this any different from a regular crayon lipstick? Well, I found that there's very little difference. And while yes, you can still use a lip crayon the same way, there are just a few things that kind of differentiate them. So blurred lip liners are typically a bit less pigmented in nature. The tips are more rounded or like domed to help create a softer look with the need of less blending. While on the other side, lip crayons might have something like a pointed tip for precise and all over color, and lip crayons tend to be more full in opacity. And yes, let me get this out there. If you have a lip crayon already, you can probably achieve the same look, but again, where the trends go, the brands follow. And think of this as another iteration of a lip product that can be multi-use, but it's meant to excel in one area specifically. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, here's how I have structured this video for you guys. So I tested out 6 different blurring lip liner products. I chose 2 very popular and reputable Korean products to get a baseline and understanding of what the trends started with. I chose 2 Western products to get a feel for how the trends have morphed and kind of become something that's more quote unquote suitable for the Western trends. And lastly, I chose 2 brand new drugstore products that seem to represent where the makeup trends are headed. Now with each one, I will be going over application, my first impressions, a wear test, and my final thoughts on each one. And at the end, I'm going to share who I think each one is for and which one I think is going to be the one and done, do-it-all product for my personal everyday routine. And before we get started, if you enjoy this video, I highly encourage you to subscribe because I do showdown videos like this one often to kind of help you figure out which is best for you, and honestly, to kind of satisfy my own curiosity as a makeup lover myself. I do see in my analytics that over half of you are not subscribed yet, and I would love if you stuck around and joined the community. I wanted to quickly let you guys know how I kind of like prepped for each one so you understand the parameters of our little like experiment. Firstly, to prep the lips and the outside areas, because I was contouring the entire like outside of my lips, I was using a Q-tip with Bioderma just to get everything off of the lips. Even if I had lip balm or Vaseline or something on it to prep my lips, I would completely take that off before going in with each product. And for each wear test, I did stick to the Edam Le Chou Chou lip balms. I did different colors, but I did the same formula just to keep the wear tests consistent. Speaking of the wear tests, I did try to stick to a 3-6-9 hour check-in for the wear tests. If it wasn't exact, I really attempted to stick as close to that schedule as possible, just so we had, again, kind of a control here. Now, here is the lineup for today. So we have the L'Oreal Blur Filler Blurring Lip Contours, the Revlon Photo Ready Instant Blur Liners, the rom&nd Lip Mate Pencils, Unleashia's Oh Happy Day Lip Pencil, the Rhode Peptide Lip Shapes, and the Refy by Blur lip liner. I'm gonna start with the two Korean lip products. Now these may not be the specific lip products that made it popular, but I want to kind of set that baseline so we understand where this trend came from and why it became so popular. We're gonna start with the Unleashia Oh Happy Day lip pencil. This retails for $14. You can currently purchase these on Ulta's website, and they do have 7 shades each of this one. Now I will say that the shades and the shade range is not the best if you tend to have a complexion like mine or anything darker, or specifically if you're not really a huge fan of like pinks. And it says that this is supposed to double as a blush, eyeshadow, and a contour. I don't know why it says doubles when that's 3 things. Now let's talk about the application of this one. So I purchased this one in the shade 06 After Party, and I felt like this was very pigmented, much more pigmented than a lot of the other ones that we're going to be covering in this video. I like it because it's easy to blend out even though it's pigmented. It does lean a little bit more red, and looking at it online, I did kind of assume that would be the case, but luckily because it was easy to blur, it became a little more of a natural flushed red look. If you have any experience with the Rhode peptide lip shapes, I would say that this one is a little bit more dry than the Rhode one. It doesn't have as much slip, but I will say that it does feel like it has a tiny bit of a velvety creaminess when you're applying it. Like I said, it is really easy to blur out with your fingers. It doesn't dry down too quickly, which I really like, and the layer feels extremely thin. But to caveat that, I did put less product and I blurred it right away because of that shade. This does have quite a thin point here. Out of all of them, I think that this one might be the skinniest if I'm not mistaken. It might actually be very similar in diameter to the rom&nd one. Now my first impression of this, because it is so red and I wanted it to look a little bit more neutral, like I said, I did smudge it out a ton, and the end result did give me more of that kind of lived in sort of natural look, which I really like. And when it comes to what I expect from these more contouring lip products, that's sort of the finish that I feel like we're all trying to go for here. We're not trying to get the precision of a lip liner, we're more so just trying to get the illusion of larger lips by creating a little bit more definition from color. I like this one specifically because, of course, it gives me a little bit more color than a brown contour. Sometimes I find that brown contours can look a little out of place if you don't sort of transition them with like another lip liner or something. The shade range though, like I said, is not my favorite. It's really hard to find a good shade for yourself if you want to use it like a contour if you're any deeper than I am. Even I had a little bit of difficulty trying to find a shade here. But again, we are working with a Korean brand and they tend to have very different trending colors than we do. I like that this one is more of that matte finish. It almost feels like nothing on the lips. There's no slickness, there's no hydration to it, which I think really aids in that contour, very natural look. And it does seem like it sets down after a few seconds after you blend it out. It doesn't even leave a powder finish. It really does feel like nothing on the lips. And again, I do feel like I went in with a pretty thin layer, but with that being said, you could still see it even with that thin layer. So I was pretty happy with it. Now for the wear test. So at our 3-hour mark of wearing this, I didn't feel like this moved at all. Both the lip liner and the lip balm were still intact. It looked exactly the same as when I first applied it. When I was looking at the footage though, it might have faded on the inner corner where I brought it in towards the center of the lips just a little bit, but the outside liner where I had lined on the outer perimeter of my lips a little bit overlined, it looked exactly the same. So I was really impressed by that. At the 6-hour mark, at this point, I had eaten dinner, I had a Thai tea, and the lip balm was pretty much gone, but I could still see the lip contour on the outer edges of the lips. I will say that a good amount had faded by this point, but you could still see like remnants at the bottom of my lip and the sides of my top lip, and in person you could see a lot more than you could in camera. I did notice that with this one. And at the 9-hour mark, our last check-in of the day, I feel like it had faded and I could see a little bit of product still around the outer area of the lips, but again, the caveat is that we did start with the product more blurred and I think less product in general since it was more blended out. So I think that if I had gone in with an extra layer, or if I really applied this, if I wanted that more red look, it would have been pretty noticeable by the 9-hour mark. And as a side note for this one, I did not reapply it throughout the day. Some of these I did reapply when it was like completely gone, so we could continue on with the wear test, and I will let you guys know in which ones I did that with. So my final thoughts on this one. I really loved how long it stayed on the lips. It felt very effortless. It looked very effortless and blurred and diffused. It gave me exactly the look that I felt like we were trying to go for with these more blurring lip contour colors. However, I hate the shade range. You guys have probably gathered that by now. It is not great. If they can extend that, maybe at least for like their Western market, I think that it would do so well here. It had such great longevity and it felt very comfortable in the sense that you couldn't really feel it at all. Now, before we move on to the other ones, I did want to let you guys know that I did attempt to do a wear test on the Unleashia one all over the lips, and my intention was to do the same thing with all of them. However, I found when I was doing that all over lip wear test, it really quickly faded in the center and like the main area of my lips, and I think it was a combination of a few things. So it had less pigmentation to begin with because we covered blurring lip liner contour things just have less pigmentation. We have a lot more micro movements with the lips than we think that we do. That would essentially just make the product fade in general on the center of your lips. That's why we see fading throughout the day, even if we're not eating or drinking anything. And because this one was the most long lasting out of the bunch that I found at this point, I thought it was safe to assume that the others would do the same thing. So I just went ahead and skipped that because the intention of this video is to use them as a contour product. So I wanted to test them out in the way that they're designed to be used. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The rom&nd Lip Mate Pencil. I have 3 of these, and I will tell you guys right now, Kaya Beige was the first one that I picked up a couple years ago, and it just doesn't work for me. Again, it's one of those that just doesn't really show up on my lips. So in this video, I am testing out Fig Spread. These retail, again, for $14. There's only one shade currently on Ulta, which is interesting because I did buy Fig Spread on Ulta a few months back, but it's not there anymore. But on their site and other retailers, they do have a total of 6 shades within this range. And it says that this is a soft, non-sticky pencil that has a smooth glide formula and a built-in finger brush on the other end for seamless blending. This one does have quite a thin tip as well. I find it very easy to work with on my lips. So I find that these have very high pigmentation. I would say higher pigmentation than the Unleashia one, and I felt like it was the most similar to a lip liner in terms of pigmentation, but again, it is a lot softer and creamier than your regular average lip liner. I do think that the brush end made it easy to diffuse the color without losing any pigmentation, because sometimes if you try to blend these products out with your finger, it does tend to kind of transfer and stick to your finger, so you have to go in with a little bit more. But I do think that the brush tip, there's a little bit of something to be desired here. It is a tapered brush, and sometimes I felt like some of the shorter bristles would flare a little bit, and I felt like it was moving the product a little bit more than I wanted it to. But at the same time, it is supposed to give that diffused look, so it makes sense that it's more of this domed, dense, fluffy brush thing versus a flatter lip brush. The texture of this was extremely creamy, like I mentioned. There was no skipping, there was no dragging. It seemed to give very even one swipe pigmentation that you were able to work with and really diffuse while you didn't have to worry about it drying down too quickly. Now, my first impression of this, and like I said, I did buy Kaya Beige years ago. I hadn't touched it in so long and I kind of forgot what it was like. So I guess this is my renewed first impression with shades that work for me. So I love this color Fig Spread on me as a contour. It adds a little bit of a mauve depth to it without being a straight up purpley or too pink of a mauve look to it. Although this is very creamy, I feel like it also dries down. You can still kind of feel it on the lips a little bit more than the Unleashia eyeshadow one, but not as much as you would feel like a film forming lip liner such as a Maybelline lip liner or like the Fenty lip liners. These kind of just feel like a long wearing creamy lipstick, I guess. And like I mentioned, this reminds me the most of a pigmented lip liner in terms of the finish of it. You don't see any of the natural lip line underneath the product, which I think is really important when you're going for more of that illusion of larger, voluminous, contoured lips. You don't want it to be super obvious, obviously, that you overline the lips, but sometimes that does tend to be what happens if you don't use the right product. But I find that this one it just makes it look very naturally full. Now for the wear test. So at 3 hours, I didn't notice in the footage, but it does seem like the outer corners, like inside where I pulled it inside the center, it did fade a little bit. And at this point, I had eaten lunch before I filmed and it didn't come off. So what you guys are seeing in this footage is the original Lip Mate pencil on the lips with a little bit of extra lip balm from before I started filming. At the 6 hour mark, I felt like this still looked very even on the lips, and the lip balm had faded at this point, but the lip liner had stayed on the outlines perfectly. I didn't feel the need to reapply the lip product, and I only reapplied the lip balm again at this point. Now I did do another check-in, like an extra check-in during dinner, because I was eating very greasy noodles and I wanted to show you guys. I felt like it was just going to be completely gone because my lips were very slick and like oily at this point. And at the 9 hour mark, it was still on the top lip, the outer perimeter of the top lip, but it did fade on the center of the bottom lip, as you can see in this footage. But overall, it was still there and still pretty noticeable, especially in person. And I didn't feel like it was uncomfortable either. My final thoughts on the rom&nd ones. I loved this color. I loved Fig Spread. I have used this one as well in Bitter Mocha a couple of times. I've paired it with like a red glossy lip and I think it looks so beautiful. It has such good longevity. I felt like the Unleashia and the rom&nd were very close in terms of how long they lasted, but the rom&nd just outperformed it a little bit more. I do feel like it dried down a little bit more and created more of a long wear film there. The shades are hard to find. That's definitely a con with this line, and they don't stay in stock as reliably as every other one that we're talking about here. But if you can find one that you like in terms of color, I would highly recommend that you try it out if what you're looking for is long-lasting wear and something that performs similarly to a lip liner, but it's still a little easier to diffuse and make it look like a contour. Moving on now to our most popular Western lip blurring products. So we're going to start with the Refy Lip Blur Lip Liner. This one I have in the shade Mauve. It is $24. This has 6 shades available at Sephora, and it's meant to be a creamy, non-drying, soft matte pencil to effortlessly blur and enhance your lips. Now let's talk application. So I picked up the shade Mauve, and the color is really beautiful. It's slightly more of a rosy berry tone than what I wanted, kind of more so than what I thought it was going to be. I was hoping that this would be a little bit more desaturated so it would look more like a contour. However, when all was said and done, it still pretty much looked like a natural illusion of shadow. I felt like this deposited thin layers when you would swipe this on the lips, so it was more of like a build-up type of product, but the pigmentation that I achieved, I would say, is a medium pigmentation. But I will say it was less pigmented than the rom&nd one because I feel like that one is more of a medium full coverage. The tip of this one is slightly bigger than the other two that we've recently talked about, but it was still pretty easy to work with. So my first impression on this one, it is more of a drier formula, which isn't a bad thing for the nature of this product. The color I feel like was not correct as a contour, but I thought it was a really pretty color in general. I would say if you're going for the most natural look, don't go for mauve. They have more brown tones like the shade Stone, Umber. There's a couple more that seem like they would be more geared towards a natural, like very natural look if you didn't want to wear any color on your lips aside from this lip contour product. I do feel like this would be a really pretty all over color though. I haven't tried it, but I want to. Now, when I say that this feels drier, I will say that when it comes to a lip contour, I kind of want that, you know? Like if you're going to be overdrawing your lips and you're going to be hitting the skin above and below your lips, you're going to want something that's not going to smudge around and smear around and stuff. You want something that's actually going to set down and not look like you put way too much product and you kind of missed your lips, you know? Now for the wear test. For the 3-hour check-in, the lip balm had faded, but you could still see the lip contour very obviously. It was prominent on the outer perimeter and the bottom lip specifically. And at this point, I reapplied the lip balm after the check-in so that we could kind of see where it was sitting at the 6-hour mark. So the 6-hour check-in, the lip balm and liner were still going strong. I felt like it was still looking really good since the last check-in. It still looked really fresh, and I would say there was a little bit of fading on top of the Cupid's bow, but you could see it on the outer areas of the top and bottom lips. So I feel like where it mattered the most, it was still looking very full and voluminous and obviously there. Now, I did go and watch a movie this night. I had dinner with my sister and my husband, and we went and watched a movie. So the check-in for this one was over 9 hours. I think we were at more like 10 hours or so. And at this point, it had pretty much faded, but you could see the remnants of it on the outside of my top and bottom lip. And again, I had sushi for dinner. We had popcorn and candy at the movie, and I just was eating a lot. So I wasn't too surprised. I think I was more surprised that it was even there to begin with. And again, it's the same case. I felt like it was a little bit more noticeable in person. So my final thoughts on this one, I felt like it had pretty good long-lasting staying power if you consider the fade as wear, which I typically do, right? So if I'm doing these wear tests, I'm looking to see if there's any sort of pigmentation left on the lips. So I would consider that still wear. I think it looked really nice. I think it would have reapplied really nicely. If I did not like go crazy on the popcorn and the candy, I'm pretty sure I would have still seen a lot of the pigmentation. So this one really impressed me. I think it's really nice. I've heard mixed things about this. I've heard that the stick is a bit too dry, and when people receive it or shortly after, it tends to dry and like snap off. I haven't had that issue yet, and I hope I don't, but I could see why, since the actual like texture of this does tend to be on the drier side of things. Next are the infamous Rhode peptide lip shapes. These, you guys, I mean, we know about these, right? So these retail for $24 and they do have 11 shades. So this is going to be the largest shade range of all of the ones that we're talking about today. This is meant to be a cream lip shaper that softly contours the lips and delivers high performance skincare ingredients to enhance lip volume. Very Western marketing, I would say. And it also has this funny little rubber slant tip on the other end that's supposed to allow you to blend it out better. So for this application clip, I did go in with the shade Lean. And as far as application goes, the tip is much wider and flatter than the Asian ones, and also flatter and wider than the Refy one. I felt like it was harder to concentrate the product on the outer perimeter, which again, we're not going for precision, but I will say that you want some sort of precision here. I mean, you don't want to just be slapping this all over the place like a glue stick. So it was a little bit more difficult after going from those other lip products to this one. And I've had these for a long time. I've used them for a long time. I think I had just gotten used to a smaller dome. Now there are mixed reviews on the blender on the other end. I am in the camp where I just don't really like it. I felt like it was fine before, but the more and more I use it, the less and less I like it. I feel like the blender has a tendency to make the pigmentation and make the product look streaky. It goes almost through the pigmentation if you use the long side of it. It just removes it for some reason because it doesn't like dry down quick enough. But if you wait for it to dry down, then it's kind of a moot point to try to blend it out with this blender anyways. You do have to use this a certain way, and I find the best way is to use that like width to it. So I'll go in like this versus going in like this. In terms of the texture of it though, the actual product, I feel like this is like a mid-range. So it's a little creamy, it's a little slippery, it's a like right there in between type of thing. So my thoughts on this after the application and kind of like my thoughts as I've used these since I've gotten them. I love the shades that they have of the brands. It does seem to dry down after a few minutes, but not fully. Like you do feel a little less of a slip to it after a couple of minutes. I'll let it dry down a little bit and then like go on top to give it more of a chance to last on the lips. And like I said, I've had these for a long time, but I feel like it wasn't as easy to apply after using those Asian ones. I don't know. I will say though, I really like the amount of pigmentation that these have. I feel like it kind of scratches the itch of needing a lip liner on top. With some blurring contouring lip liners, I feel like they pair better with a lip liner, or you could use them alone, and this is one that I feel like you could use alone. Now the wear test, and I feel like this is where a lot of people tend to be divided here, so I'm going to share with you guys my findings with my wear test. So at the 3-hour mark, still there surprisingly, I had coffee at this point and I had pasta for lunch, and the lip balm was pretty much gone, but you could still see the Rhode lip shaper. I do think that the color played a role in how prominent it looked on the lips, because I did go for more of a deeper brown on my lips, and I felt like it was more noticeable on the bottom lip and the top corners as well, not so much on that Cupid's bow. At the 6-hour mark, it was pretty much completely gone, and the only thing that I had consumed was some tea between the 3-hour update and the 6-hour update. It just kind of faded completely. So at this point, I had decided to reapply it, and the last update, I did end it maybe an hour early because I was going to go work out. I was going to go cycle, and I reapplied it, and it disappeared again between the two check-ins, between the 6-hour and then this check-in right here. You could see a little bit on the outer corners of the top and bottom, but that was pretty much it. Like that could almost be mistaken for my natural lip pigmentation. So after this wear test, my final thoughts were that this one was my favorite shade, but it definitely did not last long. It was my favorite one in terms of being more of a natural contour, but that longevity just wasn't really there. I will say that this seems like a really great one if you want a true contour color, but you'd have to reapply it throughout the day. I would almost treat this like a traditional lipstick that needs reapplication. Now we're going to talk about the 2 new drugstore ones, and these I think are going to be the newest ones out of the bunch that we're talking about today, and they're kind of representations of how the Western industry seems to have adopted this trend. So firstly, the Revlon Photo Ready Blur Lip Liners. I have 2 shades here, number 7 Filters and number 9 Murky, and in this wear test we did use the shade Murky. So the specs for this one, this retails for $12.99, and there are 8 shades currently, and you can find them on Ulta as well. And it says that these are a blur liner that creates an instant soft focus effect with no need to blend, and it leaves lips feeling moisturized. Now right off the bat, in terms of application, I did go in with the shade Murky, which is going to be the darkest one of the 2 that I own. I feel like this has a very slippery texture. I do think that out of all of them, this is going to be the thickest applicator in general. For these, it wasn't a one swipe application. I had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and apply several layers of this to even achieve a sheer amount of pigmentation. And it wasn't necessarily a matter of letting this dry between applications and then applying more, because even if I waited a couple of minutes to apply more, it just moved that layer that was already put down on the lips. It moved it around anyways. It didn't really dry down at all. Now I will say that it looked like a natural lip gradient because of how sheer it was, but what ruined it for me was that it was shiny. So again, with these lip contouring products, I feel like the finish is very important because it kind of makes or breaks if it looks like a natural shadow or if it looks like a lip product. And these to me, I felt like looked like a lip product. I didn't feel like it looked very good on the Cupid's bow because of how sheer it looked. It was pretty obvious that you overline the lips. You could see my natural lips underneath the lip color. Maybe this would be amended if I used a darker color, but honestly, the ones that I saw online, they just didn't really look like they would suit me at all. Okay, my first impression. So if you have drier lips, but you want something that'll still add some color without being an obvious, like intense lip lip color, then I feel like this would be ideal for that. It does seem to dry down just a little bit after applying, but not enough to where that shine goes away. I kind of feel like these are similar to like a click up lip pen, like a lip balm pen. I think it would be a good overall lip color, but not necessarily a contour lip product. And it looks like you obviously drew over your lips because of that finish. And it kind of, the way that I was thinking about this and what it reminded me the most of, maybe it was the color and the finish and whatever, but it looked like I ate chocolate and I had residue from the chocolate like around my lips, and it just looked like I wanted to wipe it away. I tried so hard not to do that. All right, now let's go into the wear test. So at the 3-hour check-in, at this point I had eaten lunch, and interesting enough, the lip color was still there, but it had separated completely from my lips. So it looked like, again, a chocolate mustache, but even more prominent. And it also looked too shiny, and I had reapplied it, but I had to completely clean the lips because it wouldn't go on top of any other leftover lip balm or any other leftover lip contour. So I had to go in with more Bioderma on a Q-tip, take it off completely, and then reapply it. So because of that, this probably would not be the best for reapplication on the go. At the 6-hour mark, it was also completely gone, even though I had reapplied it. It was interesting because I hadn't eaten or drank anything between the check-ins, and it still faded. I don't know, like maybe those micro movements like what we were talking about at the beginning of the video, but yeah, it was completely gone. And then I didn't get a video of the 9-hour, but I did do a check-in at the 9-hour, and again, it was gone at that point too. So my final thoughts, I'm not a fan of this in terms of the finish, the longevity of it. I don't think any of the shades really like suit myself. I think that maybe if you want something like, maybe if you're a fan of Merit lip products and you like those barely there looking lip products, you may really like these because it'll give you a natural flush of color. And if you don't plan on wearing anything with this, like maybe you want to use this sort of like a lip crayon, then you wouldn't have to worry too much about reapplying it on top of another lip product. And lastly, for the lip contours that we're covering today are going to be these L'Oreal Blur Filler Blurring Lip Contours. I have 2 shades, Mocha Mousse and Worth It Medium, and in the wear test we are going to be wearing a Worth It Medium. This is $12.99 and it comes in 8 shades, and it's described as being a creamy formula and having a rounded tip for effortless application to achieve a fuller looking lip with a soft texture formula and a natural finish. So my first impression upon application, I felt like this had a medium to medium full pigmentation. I think after using everything though, I would categorize this in the medium pigmentation category. This one does give you a one swipe pigmentation. As far as I'm concerned, it's easy to blend out with your fingers, and it feels like it has a slight film that actually dries down. But again, it's not as intense as something like the Rom&nd one in my opinion. I do feel like this one is more pigmented than the Rhode, less pigmented than the Rom&nd, and I think it's somewhere in between with the Unleashia, but I think Unleashia may have a slight upper hand in pigmentation. But with that being said, I do feel like this does the important thing where it covers your natural lip line, so it's not obvious that you had overdrawn your lips. I do have it on today with a little bit of a lip combo, which I'll have in the description for you guys. I do think that this can look like a natural lip contour, which is really nice. My first impression, I think that this gave really nice coverage. I really enjoy the way that it almost like you can't go overboard. I feel like at least with the Worth It Medium shade that I used and with Mocha Mousse, I've learned that I just really like the amount of pigmentation. I like the color, specifically for Worth It Medium. I like that it's slightly more pink than my natural lips, but not so much so that it can't look like a natural contour. This one feels like it's somewhere in between, like it can kind of look like a lip color or like a natural shadow. Now for the wear test. So at the 3-hour check-in, this was after lunch. I had soup for lunch and the liner was still in place surprisingly. You know, with soup you like slurp and stuff, but you could still see it on the Cupid's bow really well, and all around the perimeter of my lips I felt like it was still there. So at this point I had not reapplied it because I felt like it was still going pretty strong. At the 6-hour check-in, it pretty much had faded for the most part. I could only really see it at the center of my bottom lip, and it was very slightly on top of the Cupid's bow. And at this point I had a donut and I decided to reapply this when I got home. And it seemed to reapply perfectly fine. And then lastly, at the 9-hour check-in, at this point I had eaten dinner and I took a nap. It still looked really good and the lip balm was still there. It does actually feel like it sets down on the lips. Like I really did feel like it was there and it was sitting on the lips really nicely. Maybe because I had gone in with 2 layers at this point throughout the day. So maybe starting like going forward, if I were to apply this freshly, I would go in with a layer, let it dry, and then go in with another layer, let that dry, and then put the rest of my lip products on. So my final thoughts on these, I think that it did better than the Refy ones, definitely better than the Rhode and the Revlon ones. I liked these a lot. I feel like at first I was kind of like iffy about it because I had tried the rom&nd and the Unleashia, and those tended to have even more pigmentation with even better longevity, I guess. And so my standards were pretty high, but the more and more I use these, the more and more I kind of feel like they work for my needs, I guess. They have a lot of flexibility in terms of pigmentation. They have really good longevity and they just look good on the lips. Like I have them on today and I feel like they just look really nice. So those were all of the individual in-depth wear tests and like thoughts. Now let's talk about the redeeming quality of each one, because I know that not every product is going to be for everyone. So because I did all of the tests, I do have a lot of thoughts and I feel like one may be best for one reason or another. So let's go over that. Let's start with the L'Oreal Blur Liners. I think that if you want something with pigment, but still something that you can pass off as like a blurred, very natural contour, then the L'Oreal ones would be really good for that. The Revlon blur liners, I think, again, are going to be the best if you have drier lips and you only want a little hint of color. You just want something that sort of boosts your lip color, but doesn't necessarily change the fullness of your lips. The rom&nd Lip Mates, I think, if you want really long-lasting power with a lip liner hybrid feeling to them, the rom&nd ones are going to be the ones for you. They're the most similar to a lip liner, but if you want something that seems a little bit softer, a little bit more diffused, if you find that difficult to find with long wearing lip liners, this would be a good option for you. The Unleashia one, I think, was the most undetectable on the lips in terms of the feel. So if you don't necessarily like wearing lip products because you don't like the way they feel, this would be a good one, especially if you're just wanting to add a little bit of contouring shades. Also, if you do have more of a fair complexion, I think you'll have better luck with these versus something like, I don't know, the Rhode one, the rom&nd one. I feel like the Unleashia one's going to give you very effortless blur with very even pigmentation. The Rhode peptides, if you want something that has a wider range of colors, obviously, because it is going to be the largest shade range, and you want them to look like actual shadows, like actual contours on the lips, I think that these would be really good. If you don't necessarily mind reapplying throughout the day, I think it's going to be really good for you. It's going to fade very gracefully on the lips, and I kind of feel like they faded along with the lip balm, so you're not going to be left with like a very intense outline of your lips. And lastly, the Refy lip blurs. I think that this one would be really great if you want precision. If you want really good precision, if you want something that kind of looks like a diffused powdery look right off the bat, and also you want more flexibility when it comes to pigmentation as well, I think that the Refy ones would be really nice. Okay, so now which one is the best one? So you guys, for me, what I'm looking for is comfort, a natural illusion of volume, slight definition, and more of a no fuss application. So with all of that in mind, I personally really loved the rom&nd Lip Mates. I love the pigmentation, I love the creaminess, but also how it has a no budge nature to it and how I didn't really have to think about it all day. The price is also a bonus for me because they're going to be somewhere like in that mid-range, and I feel like these are going to last me a good amount of time anyways, so I'm not too pressed about it. If you can find a shade you really like, just stick to that one. And if your requirements are anything like mine, I think that you would really, really love it. With that being said though, I a very close second had to be the L'Oreal Blur Fillers for many of the same reasons, but I do feel like the rom&nd beat it out in terms of pigmentation by just a tiny bit. If you're looking for something that's more readily available, if you live in the States or something, and you want more options in terms of color, I think the L'Oreal one would be a great fit. And I also kind of feel like this just has a little bit more flexibility in terms of usage. Like you could use this with lip liners if you want, or you can use them alone. Whereas the rom&nd one, I do feel like is a one and done lip liner contour type of thing. So that concludes this lip contour showdown. Please let me know in the comments down below if you've tried any of these and what your thoughts are. What my experience is may not be what your experience has been, and I think it would be really helpful if everyone just shared their own experiences in the comments down below for anyone that may have additional questions. This was a really fun one for me to do and kind of long overdue. I was thinking about this for quite some time, so let me know in the comments if you guys enjoyed this one. I finally made a playlist of all of the showdowns that I've done so far, so if you're curious to see what we've covered in the past, that will be available for you. And until next time, you guys, please take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye!